Hello, I'm Jessica. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a femme presenting person in my 30s. I have long copper hair that currently I have pulled up today. I have plenty of natural insulation on my body, and I am currently wearing you can barely see it, but a yellow floral dress and a black cardigan over it. I have a septum piercing, dangly earrings, and a silver necklace. The first part of today's message is Blossom Time by Reverend Carole Martignacco from the UU Church of North Hatley in Quebec. We've all probably had the experience of walking through a park or down a street, and suddenly we find ourselves in the presence of a field of flowers. Perhaps you turn a corner and a garden is laid out before you like a banquet of color and form, and you are refreshed, dazzled, and somehow, by the sheer extravagance of beauty, you feel uplifted, your spirit renewed. I, Jess, would like to point out that a person who finds smell more inspiring to my psyche than visual presentations, the sweet, overwhelming scent of flowers wafting across the wind is what I find uplifts me the most. That first part was Norbert Čapek in Czechoslovakia one morning, back in the early 20th century, as he walked through a local park in Prague. He was thinking about his Sunday service coming up, wondering what he could say to his people to bring hope in a time of great challenge. The whole of Europe was at war, and his people had seen such unspeakable losses, deaths of loved ones, soldiers gone missing. On the home front, poverty, food rationing, and scarcity. Čapek's was a humanist Unitarian congregation, so the usual celebration of communion with bread and wine would not speak to them. Yet something of that nature was needed, something to symbolize the solidarity and mutual love and support of his community for one another. As he pondered this, he turned a corner and came upon a lovely garden of blossoming flowers, so abundant and colorful it took his breath away. As he stood there, absorbing this natural beauty, he thought, yes, my people are like these blossoms. And the rest, they say, is history. Čapek went back to his study and designed the first flower communion for his Czech Unitarians, and the idea spread. His wife Maya, also a Unitarian minister, brought it to North America in 1940, and it spread like wildflowers. Now celebrated annually in UU churches all across the globe for various occasions and all seasons of the year. Part of what touched Čapek is the essence of the flower's charm, its fragility. And the garden he observed that day held many varieties, each one uniquely beautiful. Together, they were a glorious display. The colors enhanced each other, the richness of so many shapes and textures together. Our world is not so different now than in Čapek's time. Makes me wonder why we call it news. Is war ever new? Unitarian poet Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "The earth laughs in flowers. Wherever flowers stand in the garden, there is joy." My daughter Anna, who used to follow me around in the garden, has become a master gardener. In her community garden, she plants sunflowers among the tomatoes and squash vines, marigolds between rows of cabbage and kohlrabi. She photographs the exquisite zucchini blossoms before they set fruit, because of course, before the vegetables or fruits comes the blossom. And it was the same in the long story of Earth's evolution. I'll now share another reading. It's a related reading by Reverend Carole Martignacco. It's called All Beings Are Blossoms, a reading from the Sacred Book of Nature. Once upon a time, long, long ago, it so happened, We don't know why. There were no reporters on the scene and no one to follow the news reports if there were. But it started about 250 million years ago in the middle of the Mesozoic era. Suddenly, it seemed, at least in terms of geologic time, after hundreds of millions of years, somewhere during the shift from Carboniferous to Cretaceous mode, the inexhaustible spirit of life that some call God, or what process theologian Henry Nelson Wyman named the creative interchange, for whatever reason, decided Earth needed redecorating. As if nature were bored with the drastic landscape, the momentous decision for Earth to burst into blossom changed everything. Seeds had existed for some time before, like the seeds in a pine cone, but they depended on wind or animals to transport and pollinate them. Flower was Earth's way of forming a fruit so a plant could protect its seeds, improving the success of the whole process of pollination and reproduction. So, gradually, the first angiosperms developed and began to prevail, becoming widespread across the face of the Earth. By about 125 million years ago, give or take a day or two, during the mid to upper Cretaceous period, fruit-bearing seeds began wildly diversifying, quickly surpassing fruits, conifers, or evergreens as the dominant form of plant life. I say there are no reporters on the scene. What we do have is the fossil record showing step-by-step stages of plant development, adding artistry to the genius of evolution. It so happened that nature's invention turned out to be not only efficient, but outrageously beautiful. And of course, nature didn't stop there, it never does. Evolution went right on, simultaneously developing an equally diverse insect population to help pollinate the flowers. Many of the insects we have today, even those tiny pesky to human creatures, we bat away without thinking, do much of the heavy work of pollination. And without them or the flowers, there'd be no food. You're perhaps familiar with the quote by Emerson, "Earth laughs in flowers." Can't you see it? Earth as a living organism, and as we are increasingly understanding, a sentient being. Imagine Earth suddenly bursting into laughter, surprised into joy by its invention of flowers, not necessarily knowing it would lead to the many varieties of flowers we know today. This momentous miracle story, told and retold in our own day for all who care to read the living pages of nature's sacred scripture. Flowers, in the long and creative run of evolutionary time, gave rise to other forms of life, including mammals and eventually, most recently, humankind. Why do I tell this story of nature's amazing invention? Because flowers are not just ornamental, though for sheer beauty, they are beyond extravagant. I tell it because without them, humankind would not exist. We are not only intimately related to them, we depend upon them for our very sustenance. In this interconnected web of existence, of which we are a part, they are our ancestors. We bear a likeness to them. And it's true, as the Japanese Zen master Roshi Sawa Nakagawa once said, in a blossoming universe, all beings are flowers. We have this saying, bloom where you are planted. I think that means that in every moment we have a choice, in response to circumstances or events around us, to open up or close down. And I believe that is what Reverend Chopek knew when he invented the first flower communion, when he likened the garden to his congregation of brave beings. The energy of flowers is that in order to flourish, they must open. We are like flowers when we open to life in all its diversity and possibility. When we risk reaching beyond ourselves to blossom into being more than we are. We are part of the same nature that invented flowers. We come out of the same story of evolution. How are we kin to the flowers? How do we humans blossom? Chapek saw his congregation as a bouquet of flowers in the way they return every year, rising up out of the cold earth, some like the daffodils and tulips, with the last remnants of snow still frosting their fragile petals. Each of us has felt times when our lives were opening up, when our whole spirit seemed to come alive and expand, when we reached beyond who we were and spread our joy into the world. Each of us has been privileged to witness this blossoming of the human spirit in countless ways, in ourselves and others. We see it these days in the news, in the remarkable courage of the people in Ukraine defending their homeland, or bravely leaving to make a new life in the relative safety of foreign lands. We see it when young adults step into new phases of their lives, embracing the unknown. We see it anytime one of us faces a difficult diagnosis and chooses the path of healing wherever it leads. There's a reason we celebrate life's rites of passage and transitional events with flowers, weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, musical performances, even funerals and memorials. Symbolizing what? The beauty of a life in its living and in its passing. And because the fragility of the flower, like a human life, makes it all the more poignantly beautiful. So the essence of flowering is openness. And since we are related to the flowers through our long shared story of evolution, let us choose to blossom intentionally. Whatever is happening around us, in our hearts, we can say yes to life with exuberance that could just spread like wildflowers and change the whole landscape.